Hey guys, well, today we continue our Who is More Free series, and the subject of today's episode is Japan. Well, there's gonna be a little bit of history I'm going to talk about before I get to the meat of this episode, which is Chapter 3 of their Constitution, titled Rights and Duties of the People. The one I want to get to first, though, is Chapter 2, which is really just one article. It's called Renunciation of War. There's a bit of a sketchy history behind this one. But the thing is, this is a policy that basically says Japan renounces war as a means of boosting their country, as a means of ensuring their survival and their economic growth. But this whole document was actually overseen by Americans, headed by General Douglas MacArthur in 1946, because he was the commander of the Allied forces in Japan during World War II. And it was the U.S. who actually helped to craft this document along with the Japanese Diet, and there were some Japanese scholars who, refined it afterwards until the Diet actually passed it and it became the law of the land. And we'll see the Western influence as we go through these things. We're only going to go through Articles 10 through 40 because that's what encompasses what's included, I should say, in Chapter 3. But before we do that, I want to get to this renunciation of war, and you'll see why this is such an important part of their constitution. But before I say that too, I also want to mention that there was a constitution that Japan had before this one called the Meiji Constitution, and that's what they had when they were an imperial monarchy. And what ensued from this after the Americans got involved after the defeat of Japan in World War II, when they helped them to craft this new constitution, they became kind of what the United Kingdom is, really. They became a constitutional monarchy with a social democracy along with it. But anyway, Chapter 1 basically deals with the emperor and his role in Japanese society. Chapter 2 here is one article, and that's Article 9. That's what we're going to talk about. So here we go. Chapter 2, Renunciation of War. Article 9, aspiring sincerely to an international peace based on justice and order, the Japanese people forever renounce war as a sovereign right of the nation and the threat or use of force as a means of settling international disputes. In order to accomplish the aim of the preceding paragraph, land, sea, and air forces, as well as other war potential, will never be maintained. The right of belligerency of the state will not be recognized. An anti-war constitutional amendment. Now, the fact that the United States was instrumental in getting this thing developed, I kind of have a suspicion here that the United States sort of had an ulterior motive in helping them to craft this constitution to make them more business friendly to the U.S. But that's a discussion for another time. Today we're going to be talking mainly about this. Chapter 3, that's the next one. Rights and Duties of the People. We start here with Article 10. The conditions necessary for being a Japanese national shall be determined by law. Well, that's simple. That just basically means the Japanese Diet determines, what the criteria needs to be in order to become a Japanese citizen. Very simple. Before I continue, the one thing we'll find out about this is that the articles in this Constitution are actually pretty easy to follow. They're very straightforward. The whole document has 103 articles, but they're usually very short. So if anybody's looking to read up a really good, clear-cut constitution that just simplifies everything but encompasses all the necessary ground that it can, the Japanese Constitution is a great place to start. So anyway, here we go with Article 11. The people shall not be prevented from enjoying any of the fundamental human rights. These fundamental human rights guaranteed to the people by this Constitution shall be conferred upon the people of this and future generations as eternal and inviolable rights. In other words, the constitutional rights guaranteed to all Japanese citizens won't be infringed in any way by future legislation or any behavior from the state. That's basically what that's saying. Article 12. The freedoms and rights guaranteed to the people by this Constitution shall be maintained by the constant endeavor of the people, who shall refrain from any abuse of these freedoms and rights, and shall always be responsible for utilizing them for the public welfare. Here's where you start to see Japanese culture begin to show itself in this document, at least as far as the human rights part of it is concerned. Because what it's basically saying here is, whatever freedoms and rights you have as a Japanese citizen, you have to go about your life with the public welfare in mind. You can do what you want to do as an individual, but you can't do it at the expense of the well-being of others. That's extremely important. It's a great mindset to have, really, because basically, when people grow up in Japan, if they feel free, they do it knowing that they're also not only promoting their own futures, they're promoting the well-being of the greater society. And if you look at Japan today, they've accomplished a lot with this particular document. Ever since it was established, they've become the fourth largest economy in the world and one of the biggest, most stable social democracies out there. That says a lot. So anyway, Article 13, all the people shall be respected as individuals. Okay. Their right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness shall, to the extent that it does not interfere with the public welfare, be the supreme consideration in legislation and in other governmental affairs. This is incredibly important here. The language of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, you can tell this is where America got involved, where Douglas MacArthur and the American dignitaries slipped that in there, because that's directly out of our own Constitution. But what's most important is the end part of this, where it says the government's legislative process has to consider the public welfare first. And if it's sacrificed in any way, that it can't be considered. This is really, really important. All right. So much like Canada, Japan's government, by this alone, their decisions and their behaviors are tied to the well-being of the public. Whereas in the U.S. Constitution, the government is basically totally separated from the public outside of the fact that we can vote our representatives in and out. And that's not nearly enough. And you'll find out, we're going to find out later on here as we approach from Article 14 onward as to why that is. All right. Article 14, all the people are equal under the law, and there shall be no discrimination in political, economic, or social relations because of race, creed, sex, social status, or family origin. Peers and peerage shall not be recognized. No privilege shall accompany any award of honor, decoration, or any distinction, nor shall any such award be valid beyond the lifetime of the individual who now holds or thereafter may receive it. Okay, well that sounds pretty sensible there. I mean, that just basically says nobody's going to be recognized for something after they're dead. It's history. History books may say they were during this time, but unlike here in the United States, where we tend to memorialize historical figures and try to carry it on as if it's still a thing, in Japan they're basically saying once you're dead, the prestige that comes with the awards you carried and everything else is consigned to history. It's no longer valid. Well, okay, that makes sense on a practical level. Higher up here, where it basically says everyone's the same. That's basically all this is saying, and it says all of the people, not all the citizens. It's all the people. So once again, this Constitution is highly inclusive, which is really, really good. So let's move on to Article 15 here. The people have the inalienable right to choose their public officials and dismiss them. So basically, they have the right to vote them in and out. All public officials are servants of the whole community and not any group thereof. This is critical. This is really critical because it basically says it doesn't matter what party a member of the Japanese Diet is. They cannot serve strictly the people that voted them in. They have to serve everybody. Everything has to be considered. Everybody's well-being. And this is something we really don't have in the United States. So again, this is something they did right, even though the Americans helped them out a little bit. But I think this is, again, part of Japanese culture showing up in the document. So anyway, it continues. Universal adult suffrage is guaranteed with regard to the election of public officials. The right to vote. It's universal. You can't get around it, period. Again, simple language, direct, takes care of the problem. In all elections, secrecy of the ballot shall not be violated. No voter shall be answerable publicly or privately for the choice he has made. This is really important too. This is something that doesn't happen in the U.S. either. While people consider discussing politics taboo in the United States, even if you did discuss it in Japan, by law they cannot do anything against you for voting the way you did or holding the beliefs that you hold. In the United States, this happens all the time. Lefties get targeted by people on the right, and people on the right love to go after people on the left for the beliefs they hold and who they vote for, and it's just one big volatile mess. But in Japan, they have a constitutional amendment that basically, at least legally, tries to keep that in check. Article 16. Every person shall have the right of peaceful petition for redress of damage, for the removal of public officials, or the enhancement, repeal, or amendment of laws, ordinances, or regulations, and for other matters, nor shall any person be in any way discriminated against for sponsoring such a petition. Okay, so if you want to petition the government, do it, and you're free to do it. Nobody can do anything against you for it. Pretty simple. Article 17. Every person may sue for redress as provided by a law from the state or a public entity in case he has suffered damage through illegal act of any public official. Well, that basically gives any person in the country the ability to redress the government regardless of the official. Okay, so this is really important too. Article 18. No person shall be held in bondage of any kind. Involuntary servitude except as a punishment for crime is prohibited. All right, now I really don't know if this says like slavery in the prison system is allowed. I honestly don't know the answer to that. I'm assuming it's really not, but let's keep in mind Japan was a feudal society at one time too, a lot like the rest of Europe was. So this is something I'll have to look into more, but a lot like our own 13th Amendment that says slavery is prohibited except for a punishment for crime. So I'll have to look into a little more on that. But let's move on to Article 19. Freedom of thought and conscience shall not be violated. No thought crimes. There are no such things as thought crimes. You can think whatever you want. Awesome. Article 20. Freedom of religion is guaranteed to all. No religious organization shall receive any privileges from the state, nor exercise any political authority. That's important. No person shall be compelled to take part in any religious act, celebration, rite, or practice. The state and its organs shall refrain from religious education or any other religious activity. Okay, this is really important too because it basically says you have the freedom to worship whoever you want. There was Taoism and Shintoism and a whole bunch of stuff in Japan prior to that. I think a lot of them still do that, but it doesn't matter what your religion is in Japan. You can have whatever you want. So a lot like the United States, where their document says freedom from establishment of religion, this just says the freedom to have a religion is perfectly acceptable. So it's just another way of saying that. Anyway, Article 21. Freedom of assembly and association, as well as speech, press, and all other forms of expression are guaranteed. Okay, you have free speech in Japan. A lot of people come out and say the U.S. is the only country that has free speech. Not true at all. Not true at all. You know, the U.S. has it. Canada, to a certain extent, has some free speech. It's not exactly documented in the recent incarnation of their constitution, as I stated in my previous video. But in Japan, it's clearly stated here, you have free speech. You can say what you want. And they have a free press and all other forms of expression guaranteed. Great. No censorship shall be maintained, nor shall the secrecy of any means of communication be violated. Pretty clear cut. No censorship. You know, we don't have anything like that in our Constitution. No censorship. Because if we had no censorship, things would probably be a lot better because we would have a lot more open discussion about these things. People wouldn't be nearly as afraid to say things, and they wouldn't have to worry about social media platforms censoring their stuff. So this is really good. This is really important. We should probably have something like this too. Article 22. Every person shall have the freedom to choose and change his residence and to choose his occupation to the extent that it does not interfere with the public welfare. Once again, Japanese culture coming into play here, and a very good mindset. You can do what you want for a career and move wherever you want and do what you want as long as it doesn't interfere with public health, with the public welfare. Very, very important. We do not have that in our Constitution, and we need it. Freedom of all persons to move to a foreign country and to divest themselves from their nationality shall be inviolate. Inviolate. I've never seen this word before, but anyway. Okay, so if you're a Japanese citizen, you want to move somewhere else and renounce your Japanese citizenship, you're free to do so. That's all that means. Or you could actually say it's the other way around as well. Anybody wanting to become a Japanese citizen is free to do so in their eyes. Okay, Article 23 is a real simple one. Academic freedom is guaranteed. That's all Article 23 says. Academic freedom is guaranteed. There is no arbiter of truth. You can learn whatever you want. Why don't we have that in our Constitution? We don't have that in ours. Education keeps trying to get rigged by people who want to profit from the rest of the people in whatever way they want. In Japan here, that's prohibited from this amendment alone. So they got that right here. Article 24. Marriage shall be based only on the mutual consent of both sexes, and it shall be maintained through the mutual cooperation with the equal rights of husband and wife as a basis. With regard to the choice of spouse, property rights, inheritance, choice of domicile, I've never heard that word, divorce, and other matters pertaining to marriage and the family, laws shall be enacted from the standpoint of individual dignity and the essential equality of the sexes. Basically, it's saying that there is no patriarchy or matriarchy or anything like that in the eyes of the law when it comes to marriage. Everyone's equal. Okay, well, that's great. That's fine. Article 25. All people shall have the right to maintain a minimum standards of wholesome and cultured living. Isn't that nice? I like that. You know, this is something we don't have in the United States. The freedom as we see it in this country tends to be you can do what you want and it doesn't matter if anybody gets hurt by it, to hell with them. That's kind of the American philosophy, whereas here they're saying you could do what you want, but you can't step on anybody else to do it. So that's important. I love how they emphasize this repeatedly. In all spheres of life, the state shall use its endeavors for the promotion and extension of social welfare and security and of public health. In a roundabout way, this is guaranteeing health care as a right in the Japanese Constitution. You know, we need something like this in our Constitution as well. Because the best way to get health care, Medicare for all, universal health care, whatever you want to call it, is to enshrine it in the Constitution, and the Japanese apparently took care of that. Article 26. All people shall have the right to receive an equal education correspondent to their ability as provided by law. Okay. It looks like there's a bit of a catch in there, but, you know, that's them, not us. It's okay. All people shall be obligated to have all boys and girls under their protection receive ordinary education as provided by law. Such compulsory education shall be free. Such compulsory education shall be free. Free education is enshrined in the Japanese Constitution. Isn't that something? I'm loving this, man. I'm loving what these constitutions around the world are saying up to this point. I've only done like 3, but hey. We'll hear about the next one when this is over. Article 27. All people shall have the right and the obligation to work. Okay, well, that's a little bit of Japanese culture coming into play again. The obligation to work. Japan is a very work-oriented culture. It apparently does a great honor to your family if you really strive for excellence and try to succeed in getting material well-being and all that stuff. South Korea has something similar as well, but this is just one of those endearments to Japanese culture and what makes them so fascinating. Standards for wages, hours, rest, and other working conditions shall be fixed by law. Children shall not be exploited. Important here, children are not to be exploited. This is great. The United States once did that. We don't anymore. But unfortunately, it's not in the Constitution. You know, there's a lot of things that are not in our Constitution that should be in there. So the Japanese did a great job here with this one, even if the Americans may have helped them. We don't know. I don't know. But anyway. Article 28. The right for workers to organize and to bargain and act collectively is guaranteed. Article 28 of the Japanese Constitution is the right to form a union and the right to collectively bargain. We need that as well. The PRO Act, the hell with it. We need a constitutional amendment guaranteeing the right to organize in our country. The Japanese took care of it here. Great job. Article 29. The right to own or to hold property is inviolable, whatever. In other words, you can't violate someone's right to own property. That's what that is. Property rights shall be defined by law in conformity with the public welfare. Once again, they're looking out for each other in this. This is great. Private property may be taken for public use upon just compensation, therefore. The word just is doing heavy lifting. So what is just compensation? It's really situational, as with anything in this regard. So yeah, this is pretty much something like we have what we call eminent domain in the United States. If the government needs your property for something or parts of your property, they have to compensate you before taking it or as they take it, whatever. Article 30. The people shall be liable to taxation as provided by law. Well, okay, the government has the right to tax. This is basically the same all over the world. Article 31. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, nor shall any other criminal penalty be imposed except according to the procedure established by law. Okay, so basically, this is the legal part of it. It basically says that you can't just arbitrarily charge somebody or kill them or imprison them. They're entitled to due process. That's just what this is saying. Article 32. No person shall be denied the right of access to the courts. Notice it says no person and not no citizen. No person shall be denied right access to the courts. The Japanese understand here that anybody visiting their country or just a regular resident but not a citizen could end up in a situation where they would need the courts. And so they said all people. Well, this is good. Article 33. No person shall be apprehended except upon warrant issued by a competent judicial officer which specifies the offense with which the person is charged, unless he is apprehended, the offense being committed. Okay, so a warrant isn't necessary if someone is caught in the act. That's what this is saying. Because if you see them, you have a witness, you have evidence right then and there. A warrant, it seems to be a bit redundant at that point. So that's kind of the logic of that. Understandable. Article 34. No person shall be arrested or detained without being at once informed of the charges against him or without the immediate privilege of counsel, nor shall he be detained without adequate cause, and upon demand of any person, such case must be immediately shown in open court in his presence and the presence of his counsel. Okay, well that's basically the same as in any developed country. A person has a right to a lawyer, or a barrister. Some people call them barristers in some cases, if they're charged with a crime, and they can't be denied that. Article 35. The right of all persons to be secure in their homes, papers, and effects against entries, searches, and seizures shall not be impaired, except upon warrant issued for adequate cause, and particularly describing the place to be searched and things to be seized, except as provided by Article 33. Okay, so basically reiterating 33, when you have a situation where you need to search a home or any kind of location, you need to gather evidence, you have to have a warrant, unless you've caught them in the act of doing it. So this is really just further iteration of Article 33 here. So, okay, each search or seizure shall be made upon separate warrant issued by a competent judicial officer. Okay, well, basically you just have to go to the court and tell the judge we need a warrant, and then they do it. Same thing we do in the States. Article 36. The infliction of torture by any public officer and cruel punishments are absolutely forbidden. Okay, here we start getting into some cultural differences if you're looking at it from the outside. What is the definition of torture by Japanese standards? Or what is cruel punishments by Japanese standards compared to American standards? It's a little more subjective than it's really designed to be. The language is very subjective here. It's a little wiggle room, depending on the circumstances and what events are happening then, what the sentiment is at the time. So it's one of those areas where it's really hard to be as specific as you can be. But anyway, Article 37. In all criminal cases, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial tribunal. He shall be permitted full opportunity to examine all witnesses, and he shall have the right of compulsory process for obtaining witnesses on his behalf at public expense. At all times the accused shall have the assistance of competent counsel, who shall, if the accused is unable to secure the same for his own efforts, be assigned to his use by the state. Okay, basically that's like in the Miranda rights, if you have the right to an attorney. If you can't afford one will be provided for you at no charge. That's all. That's the gist of that one. Article 38. No person shall be compelled to testify against himself, self-incrimination. Confession made under compulsion, torture, or threat, or after prolonged arrest or detention shall not be admitted in evidence. Okay, well, there's actually some logic here. Basically, if this is basically saying any such circumstance could be construed as coercion, and therefore the evidence should be ruled inadmissible. Well, this adds to kind of the personal freedom aspect of being a Japanese citizen. So there you go. No person shall be convicted or punished in cases where the only proof against him is his own confession. There's a good bit of logic here as well, because confessions can be coerced, and without evidence, anything is hearsay. So it's pretty straightforward there. Article 39. No person shall be held criminally liable for an act which was lawful at the time it was committed, or of which he has been acquitted, nor shall he be placed in double jeopardy. Okay, so if you do something legal, you can't construe the meaning of the law to arrest them for it, and you can't be held in double jeopardy. Same thing in the U.S. Article 40. Any person, in case he is acquitted after he has been arrested or detained, may sue the state or redress as provided by law. So, unlike in the United States, where once you've served your time and you're released, you can't sue the government for damages if they got the wrong person. But in Japan, even if you have been released, you can sue them for redress, because you were wronged and you deserve to be compensated as a result of that. The logic here is pretty straightforward. Even though you may serve a sentence to term, it's still possible they got the wrong person, and later on evidence could come out. That is definitely possible. So that is the third chapter of the Japanese Constitution that deals with human rights. This wasn't pretty long. The Japanese Constitution is actually very easy to follow. It's very simply written. If anybody's looking to study up on this, I recommend it. It's a nice piece of political literature. And next week, whenever I get around to it, really, the next country on the list is New Zealand. So we're going to be going Kiwi and exploring Middle Earth the next time we do a constitutional discussion here. So thank you everyone for listening. Please hit the subscribe button. Please hit that bell so you're notified of when a video drops. And when we see you next time, we'll be discussing New Zealand. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a nice one.